nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight's meeting is going to be a little bit unique. Before we get started, though, I'd like to introduce Ken Ruse from the firm, normal solicitor Charles Potash. Ken is representing their firm tonight, and welcome. Thank you. Tonight our meeting is going to consist of two separate meetings. We're going to have a special action meeting, and after that we will then go into the regular scheduled work session. During the meeting, first we will conduct a brief official public action meeting followed by a public work session where the board will hear a variety of reports and have discussion regarding topics which may be scheduled for official action at a future meeting. During this meeting, we will not be voting or making the final decision on any topic. Questions and comments by members of the audience will be limited to those topics on the agenda for this meeting. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 3 minutes. This limit will permit time for all people who would wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. I want to clarify some things because I'm just looking at the special action agenda meeting. I'd ask that everyone turn to BA1. On BA1, it does not have a place for audience of citizens. We will have an audience of citizens under the special action meeting tonight. Again, I'd like to clarify that there will be time for an audience of citizens during the special action agenda. Another thing I'd like to comment on is we've had quite a few meetings. There was an executive session held Wednesday, November 1st, to do with personnel and possible litigation matters. Tonight, before tonight's meeting, we had a conference session. And after the meeting tonight, we will go into another executive session to discuss litigation. So bear with me because we've been having quite a few meetings, and I just want to make sure everyone here is aware of the meetings that did take place. In saying that, anybody have any questions or comments on that before we move on to the special action agenda? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to page BA1, and I'll turn it over to our superintendent. Yes, we will. Ken brings out a good point. We'll go through all 3 items, and after our superintendent goes over these items, we will then open it to an audience of citizens. Okay? Okay, Dr. Bose.
Mr. President, members of the board, you're considering special action tonight to make appointments to the acting positions of Director of Secondary Education and Director of Elementary Education. Those are positions that have been staffed previously in our school district but have been absent personnel assigned to those positions since a change of assignment and an extensive illness. So the board is being asked to approve acting directors in both of those positions for the balance of the current school year, and to provide compensation based upon a stipend so that the base pay is not changed by a temporary assignment. And then thirdly, the board is asked to ratify a trip that's already occurred, which was a part of a secondary experience, a secondary education experience for the 4 secondary schools involved in traveling to and participating in a band contest at Hershey. So the board is approving that retroactively. And so the board might wish to move these items individually or as a package at its own discretion. It is recommended that the board approve these 3 recommendations.
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we open all 3 items up for comments or questions from the board members now? We'll open it up to board members for questions, and then after that, we'll open up an audience of citizens. Nagel?
Yes, Mr. President, during the time that Dr. Sugar was with us at North Wales Elementary, he had provided for himself and this district a dissertation called The Reform in a Public School, the Integration of Heterogeneous Instruction in Reading and Math Using North Wales Elementary Students. And I would appreciate it if we, through Dr. Bose, would secure this dissertation. I believe it's important reading at this time for this board, and also in light of the reading curriculum review that we currently have, that this reading be made available to the board, and if that dissertation can be secured for us.
We'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's over to this side. Any questions on this side? This side?
No. Yes, I'd just like to state that up until last week, we were led to believe that a decision would be made by Dr. Keffer, or need to be made by the middle of December, because it was anticipated that between the medical leave and sick days that he would be taking, it would be expired, and we would be able to then find out whether or not Mr. Keffer would be returning, or whether we'd be released so that we could fill this position permanently. With the new information that's come forward regarding the extension of that, perhaps into the spring, I had put a number of questions on the floor regarding our obligation to continue under the same circumstances that we are now. In other words, having a paid director of elementary ed, having to fill that with another interim, and extending the period of time in which we cannot move forward with a permanent replacement. I didn't hear anything back regarding the litigation. I also put questions forward regarding if vacation days are in fact the issue here. I believe we have certain protections in place that wouldn't necessarily require us to honor them to be used as extended time off in the manner in which it's being presented. Those questions have not been answered. The other problems I have in respect to the elementary education position is that on top of the salary that's now being paid to the formal director of elementary ed, we would now be compensating $82,000 for Dr. Sugar, and then we would now have to place an interim principal at Bridle Path, adding to our list of interims. This past year, we had a couple of circumstances that made it necessary for interim principals to go into, I believe it was Montgomery Elementary, and we also had interim principals at Inglewood. Now, fortunately, I believe they worked very well. However, by doing this, we're now going to disrupt another elementary school population with another new employee. Those are my concerns, and the reason why I'll ask for these to be broken out into separate motions.
You want to comment on that as far as any of the questions?
Well, I recognize what Mrs. Shear said about the employee who's on extended sick leave, and I'm under the impression that the response that the board wanted would be delivered in an executive session because of the deliberation it may wish to have on that particular situation.
Okay, but unless that's been given, we are being asked to carry through a contract until June of '95, which in effect, that answer could very well affect just how long it would take before we could actually initiate a formal search for a permanent replacement, and therefore how long we would necessarily have to go this route.
Do you want to, we'll wait till after the audience of citizens if you want to bring that up as a motion, as two separate motions.
I'm just asking,
Sure.
it hasn't been designated, doesn't require any formal request, just read them as separate motions, Tom.
Sure, as opposed to
Okay.
written.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we'll open it up for audience of citizens. Mr. Anderson,
Come to this podium, please.
could you come to this podium over here?
We'll need to ask that lady to move.
It's right on the circuit, Dr. Holland.
Good evening, Greg Anderson, Montgomery Township. I wanted to ask a question to follow up on something Mrs. Scher just said. Does this imply that both of these gentlemen would no longer be the principals at their respective schools, or are these additional responsibilities?
For one, it's an additional responsibility. For the other, we would be looking for interim principals.
So this would become more or less a full-time job for Mr. Sugar, but one of Mr. Bond's additional responsibilities.
That's correct.
Then I would ask, does Mr. Bond have the time to do this? I'm led to believe that he has additional obligations outside the school district as far as teaching at the university level, and will he be able to give this job the justice it deserves, considering it hasn't been filled for a long time?
I believe so, and it was Dr. Bond's suggestion himself.
Okay. That's the only question I had. I wondered about how many additional responsibilities will be put on people who already have a lot to do. And the second thing is, does this in any way prejudice beginning a search committee to find full-time replacements for these
Not
positions?
at all. This is an appointment for the duration of this school year only, with no commitment beyond that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any other questions, comments? Okay, hearing or seeing none, let's move on. And as Mrs. Scher brought to our attention, we should handle these one item at a time. So let's come back to item number 1. And I'd ask that you would read them, Dr. Bose, individually.
Recommend approval of Dr. Juan Bond as Acting Director of Secondary Education for the balance of the 1995-96 school year, with a stipend of $9,397.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Mengel, seconded by Mr. Kukowski. Any questions or comments?
Only to thank Dr. Bond for coming forward to offer his services
Absolutely.
in our time of need on taking on these responsibilities with a very limited compensation, in addition to what he was already guaranteed.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to item number 2.
Second recommendation is to appoint Thomas Sugar as Acting Director of Elementary Education for the balance of the 1995 school year, with a stipend of $7,428,000.
So moved.
Excuse me.
Second.
Moved by Mr. White, second by Mr. Reckham. Questions or comments on the motion?
I'd like to make a comment, just that I really believe that both of these positions have to be filled. There isn't somebody in them, there hasn't been somebody in them, and to keep the district moving forward until we can go out and secure, we need somebody in these positions to take the load off the pocketbooks. That's why I'm supporting.
Thank you, Ron. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it.
It's 2.
Yes.
7-2.
7-2. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 3.
This is a recommendation that the board ratify approval for Pembroke, Pendale, and Penfield bands, band fronts, and cheerleaders, accompanied by band directors and parent chaperones, to perform in the Cavalcade of Bands State Championship at Hershey, Pennsylvania on November 4th. Transportation costs have been budgeted, no other costs to the district, and no substitute days are required.
So moved.
Okay, just for the audience, there's not a typo here. It was November 4th.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Any other questions or comments?
They took second place.
Pictures on the paper.
Yes.
That's right.
Congratulations are in order. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Okay, this meeting is now adjourned. Okay.
I need
Would now like to bring our work session to order, and I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Bose. Well, no, we'll do an audience of citizens after each topic that was covered. We'll have the board will have a chance to ask questions, and then the audience will have a chance also.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Carol Tarosi and Dr. Sue Cahill, who have responsibilities for curriculum and instruction in North Penn, focusing on language arts, reading, spelling, writing, and English. As our practice has it, we have a cycle of reviewing curriculum. Is it every 8 years? Every 8 years, in order to make adjustments to the curriculum, which might reflect in data derived from test results, or higher standards or expectations, or any good and sufficient reason that a committee of staff and citizens believes in order, and we do that prior to adopting textbooks for that same discipline. And so tonight, as a part of the annual review, we're making a presentation to the board and our guests from the public here tonight on what is now underway, what is the status of that planning initiative, and what our general goals and objectives are in undertaking that review. So I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Tarosi and Dr. Cahill.
Thank you, Dr. Bose. Good evening. Dr. Cahill and I are pleased to come before you tonight to present the first report on the curriculum review for English, language arts, and reading. As Dr. Bose explained to you, under the Goal 1 process, every curriculum area comes up for review every 8 years, and beginning this year, the areas of the language arts are taking the review process underway. The purpose of the curriculum review process under Goal 1, I would like to quote to you, is to develop a systematic plan for the objective and subjective evaluation of all areas of the curriculum, including development of the criteria by which the quality of education in the North Penn School District should be measured. As we enter this 3-year process that we are now undertaking, I think we're all aware that the areas of reading, writing, listening, and speaking interweave with all of the other subject areas and really help to form the fundamental basis for the education of all of our students. It's been a long time since we've done a really thorough review of these areas, and we're very much looking forward to it. We have 2 basic principles that we are following in this process. The first is that our focus is on student learning, and the second is that our emphasis is on quality and continuous improvement. We have a 3-year process. This year is year 1, and we are calling this the Needs Assessment Year. We are in the process of reviewing the current curriculum, examining pertinent research, and we're going to be gathering community, staff, and student input as to the current program. Upon conclusion of these reviews, recommendations will be made about the direction of the programs. Year 2, which will be 1996-97, is known as the Textbook Review and Adoption Year. In Year 2, the textbooks are reviewed and piloted, and if it is determined that new textbooks are required, we will be making recommendations to you, the school board, as to that status. Year 3, which will be 1997-98, is the implementation year, at which time we will be revising the planned courses, developing the appropriate assessments, and also doing the staff development that will be necessary to the implementation of any of these programs. Our work has gotten off to a very positive start with the entire committee. Everyone has approached this with an effort that they really want to dig into this and get going in this review process. And to provide you with more of an in-depth perspective on what we are actually doing, Dr. Cahill will take that part.
Thank you. The original committee, which was formulated
well over a year ago, consisted of approximately 47 people, 43 staff members and 4 community members. In October of this year, as we got underway, it was decided to expand the committee so that there would be an equal number, or approximately equal number, of staff members and community members, with the community members being representative of many different groups: parents, community people, business people, organizational people, senior citizens. The people who joined the committee as community members really came to us from a variety of sources. Several people called and volunteered to be part of the committee. Others were suggested to us through the coordinating councils at the coordinating council. Some were suggested by educators, some by board members. Some responded to an announcement that we had on Channel 16. And it was incumbent upon us to look at all of the people who had been suggested or volunteered, and to then formulate a committee that was representative of all of the groups that we felt needed to be represented. We really feel very fortunate that the community has been so willing to volunteer and so willing to work with us, and answered our request, almost to a man or to a woman, to join our committee. Dr. Trotzi and I, when we realized the magnitude of trying to run a committee or to work with a committee of over 80 people, we realized that we had to do some serious organization in order to make that a manageable number. So what we have done is to divide the committee into research subcommittee, needs assessment subcommittee, and a curriculum subcommittee. These 3 committees basically are approximately the same number of people, and you have in your handouts the people who comprise each of these committees. In addition to those 3 committees, we needed some way of a reporting system for those 3 committees. So we formed what we call a steering committee. The steering committee is made up of 6 members of each of the 3 subcommittees, so that we have 6 members from the research committee, 6 members from the needs assessment committee, 6 members from the curriculum committee, plus Dr. Tarozzi and myself, for a total of 20 members on our steering committee. And again, we have tried to keep the representation equal in that from each of those subcommittees, there are 3 staff members and 3 community members. So that our plans include, for this year, several different types of meetings. We will have perhaps 4, maybe 5 meetings of the full committee, at which we hope to divide into elementary and secondary concerns. We will also have subcommittee meetings on a monthly basis and a steering committee meeting on a monthly basis. Dr. Trotzi?
One of the other aspects that's very critical is the communications. There's a lot of work that we're going to be doing, and we feel very strongly that we want to be able to communicate with all of the constituents who need to hear about what we are doing. What we have done is we have devised a communications plan, which is in your packet. We've shared it with Dr. Bose, and we've shared it with the steering committee. And what I would like to do is just to highlight 3 of the major areas of that. The first area is our communication with the school board. At this point in time, we are planning to report to you 3 times during this school year. While Sue and I are the ones who are doing the presentation this time, we'd like to assure you that in the future, other committee members will also be sharing in this opportunity with us. If you should want more updates from us, we would be happy to oblige as well and give those updates to you upon your request. The second area is to communicate with our community, our parents, and our staff members. And within your packet, you will see that we have generated a number of ideas and ways in which we can continue this communication on a regular basis. The next step that we now need to do is put a timeline to that so that we can see that, in fact, what we are intending to do is actually communicated by establishing a timeline that we will follow. The third piece of communication is the end product that we hope to achieve, and what we are looking for is to actually develop a product that can be given to parents of all students within our community and parents of students who are new to our community so that they can see what they can expect from their child's program in the areas of reading, language arts, and English. We have generated a number of ideas, and with the help of the community members, they have given us an additional number of suggestions for communication that have really proven very valuable. We're always open and willing to hear new suggestions, and if at any time you have other ideas about how we can better communicate, we would be very happy to hear them.
Okay, and finally, we want to assure you that the review process will not promote change for change's sake. The current curriculum will be reviewed, keeping in mind both the research and the needs of our district as expressed by community members, parents, staff, and students. Our goal is to produce a curriculum which reflects best practices and establishes hallmarks of excellence as indicated by the research and the community needs. The Curriculum Review Committee intends to assess curricular weaknesses and strengths, to address the weaknesses, and to build upon the strengths. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Okay, why don't we start on this side for any questions?
Not at this point.
No, Bill?
I don't have a question, more of a request. And I've said this before, and I will emphasize it again. I don't think there's anything more important than we do for our students than teach reading, especially at the early grades. And I would like, and let me step back. As we were looking through some budget items, I remember noticing that it seems to be our reading scores, whatever they tell us, seem to get worse as the kids get older. And I would like, as part of your considerations, to look at in the early first grade, maybe second grade, even if, I don't want to say eliminate other subjects, but more reading, more emphasis on reading by teachers, and maybe you work in the other subjects by reading items in those curriculum, but the purpose of the lesson is to learn the reading and the communication skills and the writing skills. And if they happen to pick up the health information, that's great too. But I'm more concerned that a first grader know how to read properly and write properly and communicate properly than know the basic food groups at that age. And I would just, there's this, I know that some school districts are going to this idea of your school day is maybe only 4 subject areas of longer time period, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but they're doing it in high schools and middle schools apparently with success, and I would like us to consider that for first and second grade reading. If we could, please.
Thanks, Bill.
That's it.
Any other comments, questions over this side? Okay. Turn up over
Yeah,
here.
yes, comment. Thinking back to those of us that were elected together in '91, one of the would be Terry, Ralph, Carmen, myself, and Dick is gone. One of the first things that we had dealt with at that time was the social studies review. And I remember we went through a remarkable situation where, in fact, a minority group had risen up in that curriculum review committee and prevailed upon a board majority of 5, and I believe it was probably the only time the 5 of us ever voted together on any significant issue. And the minority report prevailed, and it was an American government question. David Fritz from Penndale did an excellent job convincing 5 board members. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I would encourage that should along the way a minority group, regardless of its size, choose not to agree with what a majority wishes to do in that review committee, that they be given complete freedom to write a report, to express that minority opinion before the board, that they not be suppressed, intimidated, hindered, or called into judgment in any way, and that whatever voice they may have or opinion they have, it come forward to this board. The other thing, I'd like to compliment both of you on this schedule. It looks very much like the model that Judy Clark used in guidance review, and Judy was most successful in convincing the board in guidance because I think she took the board along the way with that review in 3 phases, and it worked for her and it worked for all of us in the district. But as I look at your agenda, your scheduling of communications for school board, parents, etc., it looks very, very good. Is 3 meetings before the board enough? I don't know. And I think that's going to be your judgment call. If you find problems within your committee coming to terms ideologically, philosophically, whatever, then that's the time that the board needs to know, so that we can avoid the conflict that did occur with the social studies review at the end. People's feelings were hurt, and that didn't have to be. If some of those issues were brought to the school board, that'll make the ultimate decision prior to the last evening. So I wish you both luck with this. It's a major task, and it's your job. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to just point out that the Goal 1 process, I think, is one of the most key processes because we review the entire curriculum from top to bottom, subject area by subject area on a regular basis to make sure that our materials in our courses are up to date. But that doesn't mean we don't look at things in between the sessions. And I think to Bill's comment about the importance of reading, the board members will remember that over the last couple of years we've implemented reading recovery, which is aimed specifically at strengthening the reading skills at the very young age so that they catch them and make them readers early, and we don't have to remediate them in the later grades, but it's harder to do. That's the beauty of the reading recovery program, which, if you remember, last budget we restored some money to so that we could continue the reading recovery program and implement it, and that's the kind of activity that goes on all the time when we find a specific area. This Goal 1 review is to make sure that the whole process, K through 12, still fits together.
With everything that's said, I agree with each one of them as they each went along. It was each one what they said. Bill on the scores, Donna on the minority report, and Ralph again on the Goal 1. I agree with all that, and I'm glad to be a part of it. The little time I have left. And I do have one question on your timeline, November 20th. Report to Curriculum Coordinating Council. But nowhere else does it mention Coordinating Council, except again on March 25th, but in these lists of committees. Now, are you talking the Coordinating Council? Or is this the steering committee? What is it?
The Curriculum Coordinating Council is a body that was established last year that consists of the directors, it consists of the curriculum supervisors, some principals, I believe that.
Okay, all staff.
All staff members for the purpose of looking at and dealing with curriculum issues.
That's a good question. There was some confusion.
Okay.
Glad we clarified that.
Thank you.
Right. They're just staff that's involved with that.
That's
Administrative
yes.
staff?
Yes.
This office staff? Some principals?
There are some principals. There is a secondary principal, 2 secondary principals, an elementary principal at this point, and there has been some discussion about expanding the principal representation. I'm not sure where that stands as of now.
Thank you.
And just for the purposes of some additional clarification, we've talked about reading, and it's a subject near and dear to many of our hearts. Would you just discuss some of the other topics that are in this curriculum review regarding English and language arts, please?
Well, it's a very broad process that we're undertaking. We are looking at all kinds of literature. We're looking at the basal. We're looking at drama. We are looking at speech. We are looking at all areas of investigating language, which includes grammar, spelling, decoding, vocabulary. We are looking at the connection with the home, the parent connection. We are looking at writing and all of the aspects that go along with writing. We are looking at the area of study skills and learning to learn, which we refer to as metacognition. I'm missing one.
Well,
Or
critical
two.
thinking skills and higher level thinking skills, technology, and its role as part of the language arts, English reading curriculum.
Did I say handwriting?
No.
Yeah, handwriting.
Good.
Thank you. I just wanted a clarification. There was a lot more to this review than just reading.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, back over to this.
Now, as a result of the discussion, I'd just like to say Donna and I served on the Guidance Review Committee with Judy, and that's traditionally a very controversial area, and it was able to be carried through without dissent or controversy. And we were extremely successful in putting together a curriculum that I believe has been very well received and brought a lot of positive changes after a much heated discussion in the previous years. I think part of that was due to the fact that there were liaisons from the board actively involved. Donna and myself served as liaison. We were able to also communicate where we were going and how, and answer questions from other board members or concerns that may pop up with them from our involvement in that committee. And I see Terry's name is on here. However, she certainly may be continuing as a community member after tenure on the board, but a part of the steering committee as well as a part of your base committee. You might like to reconsider having one or two members of this board, particularly since there's so much activity. You may need two or three, where one may even have an alternate backup, because there are so many meetings taking place that while, say, Bill here definitely has shown some strong opinions and feelings towards this, where he would also have an alternate backup, because certainly all of these meetings that are involved with the different aspects would be a bit overwhelming. But I think you might
We can address
want to enhance the communication and also the comfort level of the board from a community's representative perspective here.
Vicki, we'll address that when we reorganize, because Terry is the representative and Bill is the acting alternate. We will
I didn't see it with Bill.
address that.
Thank you.
We'll take care of it.
I didn't see Bill there, I didn't catch Terry's name.
Exactly.
But you may want to expand that a little bit, because
Yes,
they
good
have
point.
3 different committees. You're dealing with 3 different aspects.
That's okay, we'll
But
probably
we
do
have
that
one
in
more
December. Bill?
A question. When you establish a curriculum, you've reviewed it and so forth, will you be establishing specific objectives for each of these curriculums and learning? And if you do, how will they be measured as to performance, and so that you can know that the curriculum is accomplishing what you said it was going to, and determine whether or not it should be adjusted, etc.?
Part of the Goal 1 process is to clearly state your objectives at the outset. Then, after the curriculum is developed, a Goal 1 test is also developed, an assessment tool that accompanies the curriculum. The questions on, currently, the way in which it has been done, the questions on that Goal 1 assessment match the objectives. So that so many questions would perhaps be given to a particular objective. And then there are Goal 1 test scores and analysis and program analysis.
So you can then determine how well the students are coming to grips with the curriculum as designed.
One of the statements in the actual curriculum review process is that the criteria are to be developed by which we will measure the success of the program.
Any other comments? Back over here. Okay, I have two comments. So in December, you'll be getting 2 new liaisons, okay? And the other one, I think you already addressed it, but I want to ask it again. When you come back in February, you will be bringing some people from the steering committee, and they will also report?
Yes.
Okay. And some of them are here tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They have been assured that that's an opportunity they will be given.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, we'll open up this item to the audience. Any questions or comments? Okay, Chuck.
Good evening, I'm Chuck Hammond from Montgomery Township. But first, I'd like to say it's very refreshing that we're finally discussing something about the students at one of these meetings. Dr. Cahill, again, this was an excellent report. I remember the one in the wintertime session we went through. One thing I would hope that we also address in this subject area is the use of computer technologies. I think that's something that's extremely beneficial and very lacking in this district. Thank you.
Computers.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Mr. Taylor?
I'm Bill Taylor from Lansdale. I want to observe that in the area of teacher performance, we possibly have fewer categorical statements already made by various members of the board or teachers and so on than we do in other areas such as salary. And it occurs to me that rather than looking for the goal of teacher evaluation across the board, where you seem to divide, the teachers would like to have evaluation for security and advancement, and the board would like to have evaluation for attrition and selection, negative selection. And nobody has an instrument for either way. But if you work within a particular subject or discipline, it might be possible, working with the teachers now, long before we get a bottleneck and the acrimonious, how do you say that? Anyway, you know what I mean, the mess we had for 3 years. Rather than having that happen again, you might get started here, looking for some way to evaluate teachers for a positive end we can both agree on.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Yeah.
My name's Anita Shermer from Hatfield Township. One of the current concerns that I had is the continuity of children's education from kindergarten, if you will, all the way, hopefully through college. Because I find the greatest difficulty with people today, even into adulthood, with all of us, is the ability to communicate. People not only can't read well, they cannot speak well. I find it incredulous, the things that are not taught in school anymore, the literature that's not taught. And, it's almost as if some of the students don't even know who Shakespeare is, Tolstoy, or whoever, or the old classics, etc. We seem to go into our little mode of present-day writers, etc. And my concern is that our children be well-educated from youth on up, and that speech, communication, and speech skills be followed through with each of the classes. When we went to school, we had one teacher to teach every subject. And to me, the children should be learning proper speech from each teacher. And if the teachers have a speech problem, and I view some of them do, because our children are picking up their, I hate to use the word accents because it seems condescending, but that's what they are. They're linguistic, local little accents that, you go like this and you say, well, my child wasn't raised in wherever, Is there a continuity of education for teachers as well? I think one of the words that's massacred the most is the word ask. It's X. Children of all backgrounds And so that's my main concern, that the children not be throwaway children as they get older. They need the continuity of education from speech, reading, writing, literature, math. And I would hope we would go back to the basics. They're now doing the studies of going back to the basics. And the heck with this new modern thing, and how do you feel about this? Are you comfortable with that? What is wrong with basic reading, writing, and communication skills? And I assure you, there are a lot of parents that will be totally supportive, and if we can help in any way. And for those of us who do not have the community channels, who do not have cable, who do not let that drag it into the house of MTV, etc., if there's a better way that you can find to communicate with the public, we would love to help.
Well, if you have some suggestions, let us know.
Thank you. I think I probably overstated my suggestions.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you.
Sherman. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on. Oh, thank you, Dr. Cahill. Thank you, Dr. Trotzy. And look forward to seeing you all in February.
Thank you.
Maybe before then. We'll see how it goes. Okay, turn it back over to our superintendent.
The next item for discussion is the preparation to authorize what Mr. Wood characterizes as a characterization.
That's
And he's prepared to tell us why it's in our best interest to respond to the Pennsylvania Department of Environment's suggestion that we repair the damage done by a leaking gasoline tank that's since been removed. Mr. Wood.
Yes, it's really in our best interest because there's a $10,000 a day fine if we don't do it.
So moved.
This is a situation, and some of you may remember that we opted to remove this tank, and in the process, we had some contaminated soil where there was evidence that we had some leakage. And of course, since then, we've decided that we're now using a card system. We have so few vehicles that use unleaded gasoline because we're primarily diesel with the entire fleet, that we now use a card system at a local vendor. We're paying 79 cents a gallon for unleaded gasoline, and of course, it's not worth what is required now by DEP to continue to have tanks in the ground. As a result of our removal, their main concern is groundwater quality, and in order to prove to them that we don't have a bad situation at that site, we need to go ahead with this site characterization, which involves the placement and the cost. The major cost in this, quite frankly, is the drilling of the wells. We need to drill 3 test wells that will always be in the ground. Hopefully, if we don't have to go as deep as 50 feet, this price will be reduced. This is for 50-foot wells. They put the wells in, we put a locking cap on them, and on a regular basis test the groundwater. We've had to do this in the past at the Penfield site. We've had to do it at the North Penn or Penndale Junior High or Penndale Middle School site. So in the process, every 5 feet that we drill, we have to take samples, have them analyzed, and that's all part of this service that would be provided by Groundwater Environmental Services. You have questions regarding the process?
Okay, let's start on this side this time. Any questions for Art? Ralph?
Art, you talked about monitoring. Is this going to be an ongoing monitoring over a period of time, or just while the drills are being wound?
Our experience in the past, and I guess it's when we're involved in construction and we hit rock like we do in the North Penn community, it becomes an expensive proposition. But by having the bedrock that we have a monitoring well down 9 feet now that I required the tank removal people to put in, and we hit solid bedrock at 9 feet. What happens typically is when you hit groundwater, because the bedrock base is under the tank, the contamination usually does not penetrate below grade or into groundwater. So we would find typically at the other sites that after drilling one well, we were able to back off and DEP was satisfied. I would say, Ralph, unless we found contaminated groundwater, we may have to do a yearly sample, but that's something that's very easily drawn because we have a locking cap on the 3 wells, and they merely lower a cylinder, pull a sample of water out, and send it to be analyzed.
I guess on the ongoing basis, is that something that's picked up in the standard budget, or is there an outside contractor fee that you have to?
It's something that we would take out of our normal operating budget because it would be a very reduced expenditure. It would be the cost for the tests.
Okay. So there would be, with these wells, there is the potential of some ongoing costs over the years.
These wells are lined, by the way, with PVC pipe. It is a lined well. It's just like you're drilling a water well. And it would be an expenditure, but it would be very minimal because the major cost here is drilling 3 wells.
Okay, any other questions on this side? Ms. Mayor?
Yes. Art, were these the only 3 firms you solicited for
Yes, they
the
were.
RFP? Tell me where they're from, please.
Yeah, Spot Stevens and McCoy is a Reading firm.
Reading.
Groundwater and Environmental Services is an Exton firm.
And what happened with the quote on environmental, ERM?
They have always been high in the past, and I guess they felt they couldn't compete. I mean, they did not quote.
They knew the quotes of the other firms?
No, we had sealed quotes and opened them at a given time on a given day.
So they chose not to quote the job?
Exactly.
Do you feel 2 was enough?
I'm comfortable from the standpoint that I've made comparisons in the past, and quite frankly, groundwater seems to always be low for my colleagues as well as for North Penn. They have done all our site characterizations in the past.
Do we have any service providers that are here in the North Penn School District?
None that I'm aware of. And I will have a discussion with Frank Brown. I don't know whether he has the case. This is a very specialized service.
Okay.
That's being performed.
I'd like to see us head in that direction, that if there's work to be had, that some effort is
I have
put
a
to
meeting
keep
with
the work
him.
in the district.
I have a meeting with him in a couple of weeks, and I'll certainly discuss.
He's a good man. Thank you.
No questions. Dave? Okay, over to this side. Questions, comments?
Only one to pick back on Donna. I'd like to know why only three companies were requested to respond.
One of the things I've learned, Mrs. Schur, in dealing with DER, now DEP, they give you a list of providers, and it's usually to your benefit to quote from that list of providers.
Government agencies basically having influence, or?
No. What I'm saying is they give you accepted people that can perform this task.
Mhm.
From that list, these are the 3 people I chose. I've quoted them in the past.
Okay, but there were more
Yeah.
on their list.
They
There
give you
was
a-
a much broader listing
They give you
for
the
which
co-
we
they
could
give
have.
They give you a list for the
requested.
Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Well, I'm just saying that, given the fact that there's no commitment made by us requesting an RFP other than the seeking of the lowest bid, why wouldn't we have gone for a broader field of competition? To send out 10 requests for proposals, if you get back 7 or you get back 8, the only advantage, particularly if you're working from a list of which the DER has put their stamp of approval and recommendation behind, I
think
see no harm.
geographically, you get involved in travel time. And if I'm quoting out of Hazleton, for an example, I have travel time to and from, and I find that, I conferred with our consulting engineer that did the tank removal.
But if they'd come in higher, there was no harm, there was nothing lost. Am I correct?
No,
There was
you're
nothing
absolutely-
lost, and if they wanted to risk the job by injecting the travel, then so be it, and then therefore we would have a list of 8 companies, and we would still have a comfort zone that we've given it to the lowest bidder.
We can certainly do that in the future.
We can't assume
We can do that in the
necessarily.
future.
Okay.
I mean, I have no trouble quoting it with anybody. I just know that one of the reasons we get the price we get from Groundwater and Environmental Services is they use a well driller out of Boyertown by the name of Garber, who is one of the least expensive well drillers in the entire Commonwealth, and the major part of the $7,900 is actually drilling the wells.
Well, it could have been demonstrated rather than assumed, and that's my only issue.
Well, I'm sorry I
To only
made that
seek from 3, okay, so to say if there's more competition out there, I'd like to see it come forward.
Any other comments this time? I don't have any problem with groundwater. I knew who they are, and I knew they do a good job. The only, Art, I would just ask you to clarify for the board and the audience, since it, there was the change not too long ago now, the difference between the DEP and the DER. They are two separate agencies. Will the DER...
No, it's the same agency.
It is the same, but two, can you explain it to us?
Yeah, it's
the best way you
actually,
understand it?
and we're very pleased, those of us that deal with them, it's an act whereby Governor Ridge has made this delineation, and their groups are now split, handling different, I mean, you're into wetland, one group handles wetlands, one group handles water quality, and I find them to be most cooperative. They're in Conshohocken, they're in the Lee Center, the old Lee Tire Building in Conshohocken. They're very available whenever you need them. Unfortunately, the gal that we always dealt with is leaving, the groundwater specialist, so we'll be working with someone new, but it's a good organization.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Come back to this side. Come to this side. Okay, we'll open this up to the audience, to citizens on this particular topic. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to item, the next item, board policies. Turn it back over to our superintendent.
There are two policies to be discussed and to be shaped by whatever discussion suggests ought to be improvements or considerations. One policy stems from an action taken by the board on September 5th when it voted 9-0 to adopt the policy on racial, ethnic, and social slurs. And also there was a request that such a policy contain some due process provisions for all who might be affected by the policy or be subject to its administration. The second policy is a result of a change in Pennsylvania School Code, and it comes out of the Pennsylvania legislature convened to consider crime in the state. And this policy requires every local board of school directors to adopt a policy prohibiting the presence of any weapon and requiring the expulsion for 1 year of a student who violates the policy, with certain exceptions to be provided by the policy itself. So those are the two policies that the board is considering discussing tonight, as well as inviting commentary on.
Okay, actually, I think the first one is the weapons policy.
I hand them over.
Right. Okay.
Turn it over to Ken. Mr. Roos is with us tonight from the firm of Mr. Potash and other partners. And Mr. Roos and several of us met a few days ago to discuss this policy draft and to have our questions clarified. I think that all members of the audience have the policy in hand as it's presently drafted in work copy number 2. For the benefit of the television audience, I think we should explain that in the first paragraph of the policy, we define school as school property, the school building, the school bus, or any public conveyance providing transportation to the school. So we're not talking only about the classroom, but about the entire facility, the grounds, the transportation. And not only the normal school hours, but activities at the school or activity bus trips related to school activities. In the second paragraph, there's an attempt to name and identify the most common weapons. We're all aware that the list of those things which could be used as a weapon could be much longer than the list provided. Any tool, any instrument, any implement capable of inflicting serious bodily injury. And of course, intent comes into that. Car keys can be a weapon under certain circumstances, although most of us wouldn't normally assume or believe that car keys are a weapon. In the third paragraph, the student shall be expelled for a period of not less than 1 year, as the superintendent has already explained. In the following paragraph, there's an allowance for students with exceptional students with certain abilities or a lack of abilities must be treated accordingly. Finally, this statement does not prohibit a student from having some alternative assignment, some alternative educational services, and in the final statement of the draft, the superintendent is obliged, or the designee of the superintendent is obliged, to report the discovery of any weapon prohibited by this policy to local law enforcement officials. Mr. Roos, do you have any comment regarding this before the board discusses the content?
The only comment that I would make is that most of this policy is mandated by the new amendments to the school code, which actually requires the adoption of the written policy. And this policy essentially contains the components of that law.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, let's see. I think we're going to start with this side first. Any questions or comments from this side?
I have
Mr.
a
Allen?
question, yeah. If a third grade student brings his big brother's penknife to school and gets caught, is this an automatic thing that this student must be expelled for a year, or is there somewhere in there where there's, you know, he's just showing off this toy, that is this thing so definitive and mandated that that child must be expelled for a year? Or is there room in there for us to use some judgment?
At the end of paragraph 3, we find the statement, notwithstanding the foregoing, the superintendent might recommend discipline short of expulsion on a case-by-case basis. Simply stated, the state, I believe Ken Roos would agree, the state intends automatic expulsion. You cite an example that may qualify for review on a case-by-case basis by the superintendent and the board.
Well, the language that says the school-sponsored activity, it says it starts with shall be expelled for a period of not less than 1 year. That is the language of the law, is that correct?
That is correct.
So they're making it mandatory through that shall.
Yes.
But there is a provision, is there a mechanism inside this law as to some
That's exactly.
situations? Like, I know my son was asked by his own teacher to bring in there's students, like a camping knife there with all the different.
We have provisions.
And it was elementary.
Third paragraph from the end, the provisions of this section shall not apply to a weapon being used as being a part of a program approved by a school or by an individual who is participating in the program. A student could be asked to bring a certain kind of weapon, if you will, for educational purposes. I'm not sure what a good example of that would be.
We've had revolutionary.
Kentucky rifle, or I don't know.
We had from Yorktown, so he brought in a saber, but of course it was very controlled. It was one where I brought it in, actually.
Under controlled circumstances for the educational program, this is allowed.
But I think Bill does make a good point. Some children, they're not thinking in any way of using it in a hostile way. It's more of a show and tell. We're not talking pistols or anything like that. We're talking some of those other weapons that they might find fascinating, but not see as a weapon themselves.
Is the superintendent the final say on this, or is there a higher above him?
Well, in any expulsion, the school board is the final say, subject to appeal to the courts.
But if he chooses to recommend an exception, a disciplinary short of expulsion, that within the guidelines of this law is within his abilities and would normally be covered so that he would be the final say in this determination?
The discretion to recommend a discipline short of expulsion is the superintendent's, but the recommendation of an expulsion has to be approved by the board.
But would that still apply in a mandatory case? I mean, it's like the state saying that you must expel them, and then you go through the board for a due process hearing. That's traditionally on expulsions that aren't necessarily mandated by the state. So wouldn't we be
You may still have
a choice without a choice?
No, the hearing in that case may simply be a factual determination as to whether or not the student actually had the weapon, possession of the weapon.
Okay.
There would be no discretion as far as the penalty, but there might be need to be a hearing on the factual circumstances.
Do you have any literature out there, any legal cases that would help us prepare in case well, we've had one recently, a situation such as this has occurred, as to how that law does apply, and also for instances to where we may feel that it's too harsh a punishment, and what we would need to do, what we would need to implement in order to go around the mandatory requirement, so that we could be proactive on that and be prepared if that should happen.
There are no cases interpreting this law. The law is too new. But there is certainly existing precedent regarding other expulsions is still valid. This really goes more towards establishing a penalty than anything else.
We certainly need our schools safer.
Any more questions or comments over here? Okay, over to this side.
Yes, Tom, Mr. Roos, you pointed out that most of the language here you provided us with tonight is boilerplate from the state. Can you point out which pieces are authored by yourself, your firm, or the district?
Actually, only 4 words that were inserted that were not actually in the statute itself. Okay. In the 3rd paragraph, where it says, notwithstanding the foregoing. And that's only there because the law itself is unclear and
okay.
appears to have been, I'm told, hastily passed, and it simply was there for clarification.
Okay, so other than those 4 words, all this is state. There is really no customized pieces in here for North Penn specifically?
No, nothing.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple questions. It goes on, there was a discussion about intent. Ken mentioned intent. Where is intent in the policy?
It is in the words, implement capable of inflicting serious bodily injury. There is no way that phrase can be read reasonably without an implication of some common sense, because that would be like saying anything that a person could bring to a school which could theoretically cause serious bodily injury, like car keys or a ballpoint pen or something. Obviously, that can't be possession of that can't create an expulsion. So that's where to the extent that there's an intent issue, it's there because of the way the statute's been drafted.
I guess intent, if somebody brings a firearm into school, I think it's very clear, policy or no policy, that that's serious and people take action immediately.
Correct.
I think I have my Swiss pocket knife. There's a lot difference.
Oh, we have an executive session tonight, too.
But we have expelled students that actually, where a weapon was brought in and it was but it was used wrong. The used wrong has got a separate set of policies, is that right?
No.
If somebody uses this and tries to stamp somebody, that's another event that really isn't this policy. This is bringing it on. Is that what we're covering here?
I'm not sure. I believe that the knife that you're holding
would be a weapon.
In this policy.
By terms of this policy.
Whether you had any intentions of using it or not, because
Correct.
it doesn't use the word intent.
For a knife.
I guess where is there something beyond this? Is there a plan or is there documentation for a set of administrative regulations or procedures as to how this is planned to be implemented? Because I guess the tough part is what do you do with this? It's not the same as a revolver, and a lot of times intent and usage is the difference. The set of keys, as was pointed out, I'm wondering how it's going to be applied, and how if it is going to be applied, how we could see that it's applied.
You know, we also have students that go on to trade jobs, and some of the items they may be carrying, I don't know if that again goes with programs, but it may not be something you expect, but they're construction workers or whatever, and the things they may carry on them. Another one that comes to mind from what Ralph said, say a letter opener. You think of a letter opener, well, you can't, how do you weigh intent? Sure, you might say, well, why does a student need a letter opener, at school? But yet at the same time, it is not what you call a clearly designated weapon. So I guess we're going to be looking at a lot of confusion as this moves through.
I guess I'm wondering if there isn't or is it appropriate that there this is a board policy. To support board policies, there are often administrative regulations and procedures, and is there something there? Is there something that's going to be produced to support this so that a person in a building has something to stand behind, in addition to common sense, which I think is the key to success here? But there should be something, I think, that is a little more definitive on here as you get into those things that are instrument capable of inflicting.
Yeah, there's a lot. And the
Can I-
parents
can I-
and
It's a very
students.
fuzzy area.
The parents.
If I can
Let's
I
stay over
just
on
make
this.
a quick
Go ahead.
point, is that if I'm not mistaken, our school student discipline code has had these words in it for a number of years, and it is only because the state has mandated it that we have to make it a policy. But it has been in our code for, Ken, can you guess how many years?
We strengthened the code this summer.
Okay.
It was there, but we strengthened it because of this prior to our printing in August.
But we have had a school discipline code forbidding weapons.
Absolutely.
For many years. So this is just a formalization of something that has worked very well. I mean, many of us have been part of expulsion hearings regarding weapons in the past. So it has already been working.
The main object of the legislature when it came up was handguns. And everyone wanted just to have it as handguns, and then people started adding and said, no, all weapons. And there was a lot of dispute about what a weapon was. So it's been left ambiguous, but the letter of the law is basically more a weapon that is going to be used in an intent to inflict injury. And it's going to be at the discretion of each school district what they feel is a weapon that's going to be inflicting injury. Some school districts will take Ralph's little Swiss Army knife and claim that that is a weapon and expel that student for that.
Well, my only point
And there'll be a
was
lot of
that
legislature over
We've
it.
been dealing with this for a number of years already, and the policy seems to work for us, is at least on those. We've taken them all on a case-by-case basis, as far as I know, as the hearing process is going on when an expulsion has been recommended to the board.
Terry?
No, fine.
Any other comments from this side?
No.
Let's come back over here.
I believe the difference, David, and the questions that are being asked is regarding the implement capable of inflicting serious bodily injury and how ambiguous that is. That's fairly new, and I believe, as Ken said, this is expanding it a bit further. My hope, though, would be...
No, I didn't say this was expanding. You do have a weapon in your
From our-
policy.
Okay, from what was in our discipline code. Our discipline code
Just talks
wasn't
about
quite as strict actually was more limited. I'd like to have something put in place that besides placing out this weapons policy for public consumption, so the parents and students are forewarned, and perhaps with the help of the night crier, that a little bit more education be done to let the student body know what they are vulnerable to, particularly the mandatory aspects of this, with all of these gray areas, because as, Carmen can say, well, that some districts will consider that a weapon. The Swiss Army knife, I believe you said, would definitely fit that, and that we could very well be in a position that regardless of intent, that we've got to take some sort of action in order to avoid expelling the student.
Well, the superintendent.
The superintendent would have to take action in order to avoid it, and formal steps, I guess,
That's correct.
We
to
certainly
evade implementing the law, which is a little different than him making a judgment call with an actual legitimate, guaranteed choice as to what happens with that student.
We certainly can and should talk with the principals about this subject as this goes through to public readings. I think you should expect that we would. Also, we can initiate a meeting with night crier representatives to
Yes.
seek a meeting there.
I know they recently did do in one of their latest editions something on the weapons policy, but I think maybe perhaps we need to let them know just how strong this law is and how far it can reach.
The Pennsylvania school code is clear. It requires every board of school directors to adopt the policy.
Right, I'm not
Now, we
arguing.
have to remember the environment that generated that law. an environment of a society increasingly wary of weapons, harm done and life lost. And public schools and other school settings are not now immune any longer. Witness our own experience on 2 different incidents within this past 30-day period. So, do we err on the side of safety, or do we err on the side of a strict definition that includes the kind of penknife that Mr. Reckcamp carries with him, but he's an adult. And I think this standard starts with adults recognize we all have a responsibility to the children under our care to teach them and to expect that they follow our teachings, not to take anything with them that puts their life or anybody else's life at risk. And I think this is what the general public, Mrs. Scheer, is expecting of its schools, and it may mean that we're going to make some mistakes along the way, but we're heading in the right direction of ensuring a safe environment for children, all children.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what we're interested in.
I'm not arguing with this policy. Please understand, I'm trying to understand exactly what the ramifications of this are. I accept it as a given. It has to be done because the law requires us to do this, and traditionally we will reinforce state law through policy. I just want to see that we do what we can to bring forth the dialogue that's needed with the students so that they can recognize what the jeopardy is, because we don't sit up here hoping to have increased numbers in expulsions. And the best thing we can do is to serve due notice so that they are aware of just what this means, and hopefully avoid and minimize the number of students making those mistakes. And that's what
Turn that over to Ken.
my issue with this.
I think there were some more questions over here.
I have one question that it came up because Brown Fellows NIFO. Regarding expulsions for any student, what about staff, teachers? Do we have another policy on weapons in general that is not exclusive to students, or do we just have the regular local laws?
This district?
Should we, if we don't?
Well, we should if we don't.
Let's reread some of the things we had. That question needs to be answered in
It's
the
a
next
fair
session.
question.
We can talk about that.
Thank you.
You need an answer to that for the next session. Ralph?
One other quick comment, as David pointed out, and I forgot, I'm going to go back, the packet I was sent at the beginning of the year, which is the discipline code that each student gets, I will review as it relates to weapons and that, and I suspect I'm going to feel comfortable that we do have something to back up this policy, and that each student gets it at the beginning of the year, and parent. I'll review that before next meeting.
Stay on this side. Any more comments from this side?
No, move on.
Over here? Okay. Let's open it up to the audience of citizens. Ma'am in the front?
That's fifth.
I have several problems with this. Fiffy from Lansdale. Being that my daughter's in Penndale, friends with the girl who was stabbed recently at the Votech school. My problem concerns this statement here: the provisions of this section shall not apply to a weapon being used as being part of a program approved by a school by an individual who was participating in the program. I believe the girl was stabbed with a protractor that is used in that school. What I find more offensive than the act itself is that the girl who was stabbed was expelled, or not expelled, excuse me, suspended, I believe, for a day for protecting herself. The students at Penndale were then addressed at the end of the day on the intercom, saying that if they did in fact fight back in any way, they would themselves be suspended. That is totally against anything that anyone teaches anyone that they're concerned about. You don't sit there and let someone take advantage of you. You don't sit there and let someone rape you. You don't let someone beat you up, stab you. And to suspend a student who fights back against such is unbelievable to me. And that nothing is
protecting the student who's harmed. She is actually being punished even more. And I'd like that to be addressed also. It's inconceivable to me that someone who's stabbed is then suspended for a day because she fought back. I'm not saying to discuss the case. I think that needs to be addressed.
It's a good
because
point
I teach my child the total opposite. If someone attacks you, you're to fight and kick and scream and holler as much as you want. And my school that I'm sending her to is telling her, sit there and take it or you'd be suspended. That's as offensive as the act in
I
itself.
think that's an important point under it, where, and we should take a look at take a look at paragraph. That's paragraph 5.
Because the girl was in the program.
It should say, I think it should say instrument, because
Yes.
you're declaring it a weapon. Well, you don't, even if it's in a program, if it's being used in a proper fashion, it shouldn't be described as a weapon, should it not? It should rather be the provisions of this section shall not apply to an instrument
I think it's a good point, and
being
I
used,
think Ken
because it only becomes a weapon once you've turned it
And not
into
only
one.
that, but the part where it says is capable, a gentleman brought this up, it's not that it's capable of, it's that it was actually used as a weapon. That, I believe, is the difference. Anything's capable of being used as a weapon or in harming someone. The actual wording should be used as a weapon, not capable as a weapon. That's a big difference.
Our legislators would have benefited from this conversation.
Right.
Yeah, I really think
understand the
something
part
has to be
that-
done about suspending
that when
someone
you
who
declare
fought
a
back.
weapon,
Something like the
why would
provision
you
of this section
excuse
shall
it,
not
whether
apply
it's part of
to
a
an
program or
instrument that could be used as a weapon or
That
something?
is used
Or that is used
as a weapon.
But that's not to exempt it.
No.
No,
Right,
that
to
word weapon
inflict
is
bodily
wrong.
harm.
It's bad
Was
word.
We need to take a look at that.
Yes.
Because it happens.
Tom, my point was, and in paragraph 2, the term weapon is defined. So the use of the
But
word
not
weapon
limited
is to
to.
prevent the repetition of everything again in paragraph 2, but that's still not the point. The point is used.
But see, I think what this statement here, the third from the bottom, is saying that if it's used in school, it's excluded from this policy. Well, the girl who was stabbed with a protractor that is used in that school.
And once it
So
became a
that kind of
weapon,
excludes,
it
you're
should
saying
have
there that
applied.
it's excluding her. Well, most certainly should not exclude her or anyone else.
Right.
That's the line I have a problem with.
We will look into that.
Okay.
Good point.
Thanks.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, Mr. Taylor.
Bill Taylor, Lansdale, or Shorty. This law says nothing about use. It's just carrying.
Uses of criminal.
It had nothing to do with use. It had nothing to do with intention. It's the principle is grace and your behavior in terms of how you transport something and show it and so on. I was a Boy Scout and went to high school and got through with a knife that long in my pocket. But it's not that time anymore. It's not that old time. Things have changed and suits are higher and not just lawyers get paid more, everybody does.
Thank you. Art? Mr. Ramsey?
Art Ramsey, North Wales. I guess this question I have is for the solicitor. If you suspect a student of having a weapon, does this policy give you the right to go into his locker or her locker and see if they have a weapon in there or anything?
This policy does not address search and seizure requirements that the district may have to go to. This is separate and apart from the law that establishes the district's right to do that.
Okay, don't you think we should have one in there sometime?
Well,
That'll probably come from
believe
an
you
offshoot.
that
Our
might be dealt with in a
principals have
different
that right.
policy.
Our principals have that right and exercise that right regularly.
They do have it? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
The first thing that came to my mind that was ambiguous was a bat. In the hands of your star catcher on a bus is not a problem, but there's plenty of other places where a baseball bat is a weapon, and that has to do with the program section as well. I thought of that. It seems to me, too, I'm concerned about the intent part. It seems instead of capable, I would think it should say wielded with the intent of inflicting serious bodily injury rather than just capable of, because it is defined, and later on, it basically says the possession of anything like that could be considered a weapon and an offense. My real question had to do with a potential loophole I thought of while I was sitting here, and I wondered how we handle this from a legal liability point of view. We provide transportation to 2,000 students who are not under our control at any other part of the day. How are we protected if the transportation part of this becomes a problem on part of the private education or the private busing that we provide? We have really no control over forcing those schools to expel their students, and how do we handle that in terms of refusing to provide them further transportation or having other sanction on students in that position?
It's a good question. It's about Ryder.
Sure. Okay.
Does this law apply?
Let's stay on. Any other comments, questions from the audience? In the back? Gentlemen, then we'll come back to you, Bob.
My name is Bill Tott, and I'm from Montgomery Township. I guess I just want to follow up on something one of the ladies said a few people ago. The way I read this also, this only has to do with conveyance. So I guess my question would be for Mr. Weir, do we have a policy that has to do with the direct use of something? Do you know? Because you mentioned that you're going to look into the teachers might have some code or whatever.
Well, the school discipline code, the student discipline code fully covers that.
Oh, does it? Okay. Because the case where this covers somebody bringing something in, now if a friend knows somebody has something and uses that implement, the one who brought it in gets in trouble because of this, but the one who uses it gets in trouble because of the regular discipline code. I just want to make sure that that's addressed somewhere also, because this thing only deals with the conveyance of
There are other documents and other sources on this subject.
Oh, there are?
This doesn't
Okay.
stand alone.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Bob?
Bob Graziano, Tomenson. This is a question for Mr. Roos. Our lawmakers have been known to pass laws that are not constitutional, both state and federal level. In your opinion, with the word capable there, do you think that would pass a constitutional muster?
No, sure.
I don't think there's any problem with the constitutionality of this.
Just the fact that somebody brings something that's capable of harm and can be expelled for it, you don't think that that's a constitutional problem?
Statutes are construed when they're actually interpreted by the courts in a manner, in a common sense manner. So as long as the statute itself will not be stricken for unconstitutionality, just because, provided that there can be a common sense reasonableness superimposed on the language. So as long as, that's basically the answer. So presuming that that's how it's interpreted, it should be constitutional.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, there are a lot of questions from everybody on this. I don't think it's ready to.
Dr. Zollinger.
We're not ready for a first reading, in my opinion. I think we need to bring it up again in a work session. I think Ken needs to work with Mr. Roos on this first, and I would ask that board members would call in and talk to Ken about it with more concerns, and I think we'll bring it up again in the December work session unless anybody has a problem with that. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Okay, let's move on to the second policy draft.
Dr. Bose has explained and reminded us that in a previous meeting, the board did vote for a creation of a policy regarding hate speech and group defamation. And in a separate motion, the board asked for a procedure or a policy for due process for those people involved with the school district who are already not covered by a grievance procedure or by due process, such as those members of the bargaining unit. For example, that might include board members or parents or students or those other employees who are not members of the bargaining unit. In an effort to look at these two assignments separately, we bring before you tonight the first draft for your discussion and your review as it pertains to racial, ethnic, and social slurs. Much of this language, or I should say most of this language, was lifted from NSBA, that's National School Board Association documents. We reviewed documents from the National School Boards Association, from the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, and we asked colleagues in other school districts if they had similar statements. To some degree, we're looking at new territory here, and we're looking at language that has to be lifted from several different sources to pull together this document. It has been reviewed by Mr. Potash and by Mr. Roos, and they have given us the okay to bring it to the next step, to this body for discussion and for review.
Okay, let's see. Let's start on this side. Questions or comments on the proposed policy? Terry?
I need to know what constitutes comprehensive education that shall include the development of respect for all individuals regardless of race, color, creed, national origin, age, gender, or handicap. As a Christian who abides by the Bible that says homosexuality is an abomination, I would not teach my children to call, to call out in hate speech, but at the same time, I don't want them being taught to accept things that are against my religion. So I need to know how this is going to be carried out.
Turning this over to Ken, Dr. Bose, and to Mr. Davis.
I listened thoughtfully, but I'm not sure that I can repeat your question.
Don't know if I can either. This talks about that we would have that comprehensive education includes development of respect for all individuals, regardless of wherever they stand. As a Christian, the Bible says that homosexuality is an abomination before God. I don't know which specific verse, but I know that it's in there. I teach my children that homosexuality is wrong, but I don't teach them to hate other, to have hate speech against other people. But if they are being taught in school that it is okay to be that way, then I have a problem.
Well, certainly as I reviewed this, I did not read that into this statement. As an individual, I can respect someone not necessarily agree with all of their behaviors or all of their beliefs. I can respect the individual apart from all of the behaviors or all the beliefs. I'm not sure that you want that dialogue with me here tonight, but I did not read this the way I think maybe you are.
Well, what does comprehensive education include?
Yeah,
I don't need that answered now, but what does
I think
comprehensive
that's a fair
education
question.
include?
What is what's the
fair.
definition there of comprehensive education?
This isn't changing curriculum.
So that's something you could
It's
do.
saying it exists.
Well, maybe we can find another way to say education without, I think the word comprehensive is troublesome.
Part of the statement is troublesome. It's not just the one word. But it's against my religion to have my children, being taught that. It's discriminatory to my religion, the way it stands.
I don't find that intent here, but you're wondering if it is. We will discuss that some more.
Would it help if it said as part of a comprehensive education? Because as I read it, Terry, it's directing the development of respect for all individuals, and it's defining race, color, creed, national origin, age, gender, and handicap. I mean, it's specific in those areas that it's trying to, in its area of respect for individuals, defining that. And I don't think it's defining a curriculum or the education, just saying as part of what we provide as a comprehensive education, that respect should be there.
we can find ways to eliminate the word comprehensive, but I think that throughout our program of studies, there would be any number of places, K-12, where we would teach the respect of other people, whether it's in the most recently developed guidance program, which is clearly there as universal, I believe, universal values as defined in the most recent guidance document. The review of universal values would certainly include this. If the term comprehensive education is laden with some meanings that are not clear, then I think our assignment needs to be to look at that.
Any more questions over here? No?
I see also lacking definition. Is a definition necessary for hate speech? Group defamation, I'd like to see a definition for that. I'd like to see some sort of a better understanding of what is included here on the phrase that all conduct by board members et al. All conduct, incredibly broad. And also I thought we were going to be provided with some sort of written memorandum from Potash in regards to whether this would hold up constitutionality. Did I say that right? For freedom of speech. I understand that many states are challenging these type of policies, and I thought we were going to be provided with a written memorandum. Legal opinion on that.
I'm not prepared to distribute any memorandum tonight. I did have a letter that Mr. Potash had reviewed this and had said that this, in his opinion, was ready to bring to you for further discussion. Perhaps Ken Roos can better represent the question that you're asking.
Well, I think this is very serious stuff, and I would like the attorney that is going to be the author or part author in something as serious as this be willing to submit a legal opinion in a written memorandum and take responsibility that we are not, in fact, infringing on anybody's freedom of speech, not only in policy, but whatever will entail in due process. And Lord knows I'd like to see due process here.
Any other questions, comments from over here? Okay, let's come over to this side.
Mine
Sure.
very specifically, as Donna pointed out, definitions. As I've said to you before as we were discussing this, the biggest problem I see is that most people's definition of hate speech and group defamation really is defined by their own prejudices and sensitivities. You can have some very, very hateful and vile things said, many times directed at a conservative viewpoint with labeling and stereotyping, fear-mongering, hate-mongering, but it's kind of acceptable. How do we bring a single standard determining what qualifies as hate speech? How do we, and what can we do if we, as a political body, should determine that it meets the standard of hate speech? What is the penalty? And how do we avoid that simply being that one person can be punished because they have 5 votes, the majority board willing to take an action, as opposed to someone who would be a part of the majority saying even worse things, but because they are a part of the majority control, would be excused, because if it's a penalty that's instituted by the board, it's who's holding the mantle, you know, who's holding the cards at that time. I looked at this and I said, what can we do? Okay, if someone claims and classifies people as right-wing conservative Christians willing to see Jews burning in hell for $20, is that hate speech? Is that group? If they describe them in such ways as that follows a very bigoted stereotype, what can you do? In a public letter from a director, it's absolute. There's no doubt. It depends on who you ask. Others say, well, I don't have much respect for those people, so it doesn't matter how you attack them. Those are the situations I'm finding, and I'm wondering how do we implement this with fairness?
Okay, so you had some specific questions. One, you also wanted definitions.
Right.
Okay.
And I also would like the definitions of those. I'd like to know what is our ability to implement or attach any discipline whatsoever to the use of the policy. Is it a formal way of actually carrying out the resolution that I made a motion for? We never really did follow through with a formal resolution. We had one that passed 9-0 to condemn the alleged statement regardless of the source. Traditionally, when you take the vote on that, you usually come forward and follow through with a resolution that goes beyond that vote, that carries out that vote. That hasn't occurred. I see that the board affirms the right of all students and staff to be protected from intimidation, discrimination, physical harm, and harassment, which includes comments, name-calling, physical conduct, or other expressive behavior directed at an individual or group that demeans the race, color, religion, national origin, gender, or handicapping condition of the individuals, or creates an intimidating, hostile, and demeaning environment. Now that says it affirms the right of all students and staff to be protected. Are board members protected if a teacher stands in front of a room and refers to one of them as a fundamentalist wacko, or from their Jewish perspective, or Hindu, whatever, or demeans them and mocks perhaps some kind of physical characteristic? I see we've affirmed students and staff, which I can agree with. What is that then? Intellectual freedom? Do we call that intellectual freedom? And not exactly the same definition as we define for our students and staff.
Let's try it. Okay,
It's philosophical.
I want to make sure that
questions.
Ken and Mr. Roos are getting some of these specific questions. Are you okay with the ones that we had from Ms. Mingle? She had some specific questions. Mr. Scher has some specific questions.
Right. I'm prepared to address some of them now.
Okay.
I'm also prepared, if you'd like me to.
Sure, let's give it a whirl.
Sure. I think the suggestion about a definition in the policy is an excellent one. There are, as Ms. Mingle noted, there are laws regarding hate speech, and that is one source of definitions, and that way you can be sure you have a definition that has been tested in the courts, which is a good suggestion. With respect to the scope of this policy, that's up to you as to whom it covers and who it applies to. That's your discretion. As far as the issue of due process, due process is in one sense a legal term of art, and it is a set of standards that you have to allow a injured party under certain circumstances. For example, if there's a deprivation of a property right or a liberty interest, and this due process traditionally consists of some form of a notice and a hearing. Now, when you are talking about a board policy, which my understanding is that this is to a sense of the board, you have to remember that as a school board, you are only authorized, you only have jurisdiction in certain types of matters. In other words, you have the jurisdiction in certain types of employee dismissals, employee disciplinary actions that aren't otherwise covered by a collective bargaining agreement. You have, in certain circumstances, the right to hold a hearing and the right to administer disciplinary action. Similarly, that's true with students. You have the right to expel, etc., other rights. With a board member, though, you need to understand that there's a limitation as to what a board can do, a board as a whole can do to an individual board member. A board as a whole cannot remove a board member. There are other limitations. Basically, there is no jurisdiction on the part of this body to hold a hearing, which would allow them to subpoena witnesses, compel testimony, etc., regarding administering an action that doesn't have the power to do. So that's why if you're using the term due process, if you're saying there needs to be a mechanism here, what you could have in this policy is certainly a board governance, a sense of the board. This is what action the board will take. The board may do A, B, or C, but it is you simply don't have the jurisdiction to say that if a board member says something or does something, the board doesn't have the power to hold a hearing on the issue. The board doesn't have the power to adjudicate that issue in a manner that can be decided and then appealed to whatever courts are necessary. So that's why when you're talking about the types of what happens to somebody who violates this policy, you just need to keep those limitations in mind as they apply when the board governs itself.
Are we talking about a lion with no teeth? Is that what you mean, basically?
Yeah.
That we're
Yeah,
dealing,
there's no
we're
muscle
sitting
in this,
here
there's
going through the
nothing in this.
motions and symbolism, and we've developed something that really probably is no greater than the resolution or the resolution that could have been developed to not only the allegation, but also to have made a statement on behalf of our board, giving our sentiments towards hate speech or speech that demeans these same aspects without developing a policy that can't be implemented beyond where we sit here today.
Well, lion with no teeth, that's a characterization. I can simply tell you that what you already know, which is that your power as a board to discipline individual members of the board is limited. There are certain things. There can be, as I think is discussed, you can have a censor vote. You can there could be removal from office, but there is no power to remove a board member. Even the power to remove an office is questionable under First Amendment.
Can you tell me, is this only applicable to board members? Is this policy designed only to be to board members, or students also under this policy? Is the staff under this policy? In other words, you have instances that come up where, whether it's Catholicism or any other religion, that certain statements are at times made that would fit within the language of the policy, and that's what I'm trying to see. How even is it?
Sure, sure.
The way the policy is written is this is a sense of the school board, and this is a standard of conduct that you expect not just board members, but also teachers and students to observe. In that respect, that policy, when superimposed on other things that can happen to a employee or student, for example, this is a clear declaration that this is considered unacceptable conduct by anyone in the school community. So therefore, it would, if there was, for whatever reason, an action to discipline an employee for this, certainly the fact that this policy exists would be compelling evidence to whatever tribunal tries that case.
So this would be
that's conduct that's not acceptable in this district.
This would be applicable to staff?
In a sense, this would apply, at some level, this would apply to staff, students, teachers, everyone.
Education.
Administration.
How about some other questions from over on this side? Bill, Carmen? Bill, Brewer?
Yeah, I had, some of this was already answered, but I guess the policy would apply to all members of the district, and then the question comes, how would it be administered? And what you're saying really is that it wouldn't be administered at the board level. It exists, but it would be administered, would it not, at administrative level, the student level, at the teacher level?
Well,
or would that also come in conflict with union negotiations?
It would vary on a case-by-case basis. For example, you have a student who's being expelled for a certain type of conduct. If that conduct also involves hate speech, that is a factor that you as a board can consider in determining what penalty there should be. But in certain situations, yes, this policy would be considered by a tribunal or an arbitrator or a court or something other than this body. Does that answer?
Sorry, yes.
Maybe another way, Mr. Owen, to state it is that there is a forum and a mechanism for dealing with misconduct on the part of students. There is a forum and a mechanism for dealing with employees who may be accused of misconduct. There is not one for a Board of Education, or there is not one from a member of the general public who might stand up during an opportunity to speak and say a hateful, disgusting thing. There is no forum.
Okay, I want to bring this to a close. I think we're going to have to, there's going to be further discussion on it. I'm going to now open it up. Pardon me?
It's not ready.
I'd like to open up to the audience as citizens to comment on this particular issue. Mr. Krieger?
Tom, can you just make one more remark? Tom, make one more remark before you go to hold.
Sharice Krieger from Montgomery Township. I was here on September 5th when the board voted 9-0 to develop this policy. What I read here and see here is simply a boilerplate. I was anticipating something much more definitive. I agree with Mrs. Perkowski to a certain respect. My problem in the first paragraph at the end is the inclusion of philosophy of tolerance. Over the events of this past summer, the entire community, in the name of tolerance, endured quite a bit of intolerance. Mrs. Mangle was subjected to quite a bit of intolerance, and Mrs. Leahy subjected the community to her own level of intolerance. I would like to see the words philosophy of mutual respect implemented in exchange for the word tolerance. Tolerance is an open-ended word, and it's up to the person interpreting the word. Also, on September 5th, it was my understanding that this policy was going to open up a due process not only for administrators, teachers, board members, students, but the community as well. And I don't see the language in this boilerplate policy tonight, and I agree. I think it should go back to the drawing board and come back with a little bit more substantive definition. Thank you.
Socials. I think she had her hand up a second.
Good evening, Sandy Core from Upper Gwinnett Township. I don't know if I could say it much better than Ms. Krieger and a couple other board members. Unfortunately, Dr. Bose, as much as I do respect you, I think that I might be able to take difference with you. Yesterday, I think, did prove that there is a mechanism in place to change the behavior and outcome of our sitting board members. I think it was clearly shown by this community that, in fact, we are for tolerance, respect. But tolerance, you're right, Ms. Krieger, it's very open-ended and up to different people's opinions. Problem that I have here with not only this document, but the one that we just spent a half hour, 45 minutes going over before. It's pretty funny that we pay our solicitors and gentlemen that sit here in this place so much money, and yet I'm looking at things that I think one of our children in high school or junior high school probably could have written just as easily. I'd like to know, one, who the author of this was. Two, if it happens to be an attorney that wrote this, I think you should hang your head in the mud, because you just couldn't believe that this would come from a very well-educated person. Just quite a few words that need to get rechanged about this. And if Ms. Leahy, if you did write this, when I look at this and I look at the letter that you wrote,
don't attack me. I did not write it.
I'm just
so don't
asking
even
you,
start.
I'm not starting, ma'am.
Thank you.
You know, I'm just saying we need to look at this and we need to define it. Just like the other one about weapons in the schools. There's so many open-ended words up to interpretations. Not everybody's going to agree with everybody on everything. We really need to make sure that we know what we're doing. That's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
I have a question about what she said.
Bill, hold up 1 second.
I understood that policy was written by the legislature, and all we did was change 3 words.
No,
The weapons, I believe,
She's talking
I'll
this
turn it
one.
over to Mr. Roos, but I believe that's a pretty fair statement.
That's exactly.
No, they should have known ahead of time too. Can I ask one?
Well, let's see any more questions.
See now, discriminates too.
All right, hold it. I want to be fair. Vicki, I let
won't
Bill
do it again,
go.
Tom. I'm sorry.
Before we go any further, so that the audience that's out there may have questions evolving from this too, what is a social slur? Help me out, we've got,
Well,
you
let's-
got ethnic and you got racial, I didn't know what, do we even know? Can you give me an example
Yeah, call that.
of?
Change the tape.
Okay, time out. We're going to take a, well, we've changed the tape. Are we at the 2 hour?
We can only
Are
take
we
a-
okay for another 5 minutes?
We're changing now.
Okay, we'll turn it over.
Yes.
You heard that.
Turn it over to Mr. Roos to make an attempt to explain social slurs.
As opposed to racial and ethnic.
I think maybe, my question would be to Ken, which would be, should that word social at the top be sexual?
Sexual, not social.
Or should it in the bottom be social
First
instead of
sentence in the
sexual?
second paragraph.
What are sexual slurs? We have a
Maybe it's
harassment.
supposed to be social,
Probably
not sexual.
snookums would apply.
And Ken obviously needs to look at it and go back and work with Mr. Roos.
Obviously, we need to talk about this some more.
Okay, we need to do the
Let's go
social,
back out to the audience.
because we have a sexual
Sir?
harassment policy.
My name is Chris Vallis. I just want to ask you.
Chris Vallis?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Speak up a little, please.
When you, in other words, when you talk about slurs, and how does this apply to literature, like Huckleberry Finn, the use of the word "n"? Are we going to start censoring books, or
Good point.
because
Good point.
in other words, they're demeaning the student as far as a certain race? I personally, when I read this, I think you should read something like this. A comprehensive education should include the development of decorum. A development of decorum for all individuals and how they should deal with each other, regardless of race, color, creed, or national origin, or gender, or age, or handicap. A development of decorum should be that which has been expressed thousands of years ago and should be implemented, should be defined as do unto others as you would have them do unto you, period. And the rest of it, using a very expression is poppycock, the way I read it. I just don't understand this intimidating, hostile, or demeaning environment. But I believe, in all probability, this was taken from some book in Harrisburg. I know.
Boilerplate, yeah.
I mean, it's a boilerplate somebody had to come up with, and this is what I've done in the past, but if I had to come up with something, I would look in some book that was written, and I'd pick it up and I'd say, this is it, and they'd thank me for it and pay me. But going back to the basic question, Mr. Weir, how would you address this in terms of literature? In other words, certain, like the book that I spelled out, Huckleberry Finn.
I think you bring us to a very good point there. That was not considered here.
Right.
I think you're reminding us that maybe we need to relook at that, but that was not considered in this draft.
Right. In other words, the basic policy should be, when you deal with someone, you deal with them as you want them to deal with you, period. And to say more than that is to say too much, I believe.
Thank you, sir. Sir, could you give us your town you're from?
Sir?
Could you give us
Lansdale.
Lansdale. Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor.
See, intellectual freedom versus.
Bill Taylor, Lansdale, I'd like to echo the man's choice of words. The difference between what you're looking at on the table and his development of decorum is that that's an active process. And you can recruit people to it. And you can bring somebody back to it the way a coach would correct someone who made a lousy play. Otherwise, you're trying to assess a punishment. And you're already discussing various levels of punishments for different kinds of things to different people, so it becomes a very uneven playing field. Now, under the idea of decorum, this school district has used homosexuals as teachers successfully for their full careers. And many other school districts around here have also. Now, we have a problem with our community, our society, our culture, in that what people didn't talk about, now you talk about at 4 o'clock on TV. But you're not going to solve it here.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I think I saw a hand up in the back. Yes, sir? And then I think I saw Mr. Anderson's hand, and then over to Mr. Hollis.
Bill Totten from Montgomery Township again. Mrs. Perkowski brought up a good question, which I don't think is addressed here. She asked a different thing, I guess, but it doesn't really address sexual preference. To me, this doesn't address homosexuality. It talks about sex, it talks about race, color, creed. Sex, well, it says gender one time, then it says sex down, sexual slurs down below. So I don't know if that's an intentional oversight or whether that wants to be addressed here also, but that's a kind of an add-on to her question, I think, because this kind of condones that that's okay, unless the intent is to put it in here. The other thing I want to mention is that I've heard people refer to the September 5th meeting a few times. Having read the Darby report a couple times, I actually found myself defending Donna Mengel the other night to somebody who I was talking to on the phone, because I thought what the intent is here, and if we're saying treat others, as the last two gentlemen have said, treat others as you'd like to be treated, I was defending Donna because what I got out of the Darby report, I was, some of the words she used, even her own words, I thought were pretty bad, but I was more offended by the fellow board members who have kind of said, well, Donna is Donna. And I don't think anybody's ever said to her before, gee, watch what you're saying sometimes. And I think that's all we want to be doing is warning, especially board members, that you guys are kind of held more accountable than everybody else. And, everybody will slip from time to time, and it was obviously a very heated meeting, but maybe it had gotten to a point where a month earlier something else was said and nobody said anything. The fellow board members, I find you guys as guilty as kind of, the action, some of the words that were said, whatever was said, it wasn't appropriate, but it had probably built to such a point that nobody had ever kind of said, hey, Donna, cool it a little bit. And I think this is what we're looking for here, is people to say, let's watch what we're saying and let's have a general policy in place so that we can all stand behind it and say if somebody says something, somebody else can step up and say, yo, that's not right. We have to do something. That goes for students, and I don't know how we're going to implement this with the students, but it's it's so broad. I don't see what we're saying is consequences, what's going to happen. I guess we can't define that yet, but it's a pretty tough thing. But the mutual respect, I like that idea versus tolerance, because tolerance is almost a negative word by itself. It almost is turning things around. Okay, we'll accept you. Yeah, maybe we're thinking negative things, but we'll be tolerant of you. So I like the idea of mutual respect. So if we can go in that direction, I think we'll be a lot better off. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Anderson, then Mr. Hollis.
Remind me when you see me come in next Thursday to sit over here. Okay, I'm getting a lot of exercise tonight. This is probably going to shock most of the board, but as somebody who wanted to join you, I would be concerned about serving under this policy. I think it has a lot of problems, and there's a big can of worms here. And in the way it's written right now, with the broadness of effect and the lack of definition, and the fact that it has no opportunity for sanctions, I think it's unreasonable to restrict it only to behavior of board members. I think perhaps if it could be redrafted in terms of a policy statement for the whole district and all people who are in one way or another accountable to the district, then that would be appropriate. But to phrase it at the top saying internal board policies and members, which implies a restriction only to the membership of the board, it's too narrow in that respect, and then in regard to the rest of it, it's too broad. So I think it does need to be redrafted. If I may add one more worm to the can with regard to Mrs. Prokowski's remark, she caused me to note that sexual preference is not listed among those actions which are protected in this document, and that the board might want to consider whether they want to add that to the list. I will just add that without comment. I did not take it the way she did, however. When I saw the respect for, I thought of another saying, which is hate the sin but love the sinner, and that's basically how I read the part about development of respect for all individuals. But I can't see that the policy in its current form is something that I, as a board member, certainly would want to serve under in this respect, and I think it does need reconsideration.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Ellis?
My name is Jeff Ellis from Lansdale. I think it's evident that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this policy. I think it's also evident that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in the community. It would be easy to detail all the offensive material that's been flying around the past several months, and it would take more than the amount of time I have allotted. That would, of course, include Mrs. Leahy's letter that appeared in the newspaper. So what I'd like to do is to take the opportunity to invite Mrs. Leahy to apologize for her comments and to lead us in the proper way of getting this community back together and to heal the wounds of division that are part of our community.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Any other comments or questions, ma'am?
Anita Shermer from Hatfield Township. I guess the easiest way to begin is that there's an old saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. To know someone is to love them. To know them is also to hate them. What one might consider offensive to one person may not be to another. Where someone takes offense, offense may not be meant. I find it easier to excuse someone who may say, so-and-so said this and I am offended. And if they have a personal offense, let them deal with it. But to have people who weren't there, don't know, didn't know, will never know, make accusations and spread them through a community is grave injustice. To go to a candle ceremony that is proposed as a rally, and to get the Freedom to Learn Network paper that was distributed. This is a hateful document, and anyone who wants a copy, ask me for it. It pits human beings against human beings. It's a disgrace, and I would hope any teacher would not side with this document. I'm paying for Donna, I'm paying for all of you. And only God knows what's in anyone's heart, and He'll judge us. My prayers for the Jewish community, for the grave injustice that their own kind has done them. I also hope it's found out and divulged to everyone who desecrated the temple. Rumor has it, and so do Jewish leaders, that it was a Jewish child. But Donna was blamed for that. It's unconscionable what everyone has contributed to by their lack of professional behavior. I will close with a short story, if you'll grant me maybe 30 seconds to go over a simple way to judge maybe what is hurtful or not. To deliberately inflict on someone is creating an intimidating and hostile work environment. As someone who has presented a case to the United States Supreme Court in Washington, that is the definition, creating a hostile, intimidating work environment, to deliberately do it. A child I know many years ago said to another child, in quite innocence.
Ma'am,
Do
in
you
all
know?
fairness to everyone, could you conclude?
Yeah. Do you know that you're a, and use the N-word? And it was an innocent, like, gee, do you know you're the N-word? That child got into trouble for saying that word to the child, and it was really posed as a question. And the way that was dealt with was that child who said, do you know that was told, you know the little boy on Julia named Corey? Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, you
How
really
would
need- you
how
need-
would
you
how
need
would
to
he
be fair.
how
You
would
need
he
to
feel?
conclude, ma'am.
How would he feel being told that? And
Thanks,
that child cried.
Thank you, ma'am.
That taught that child a lesson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the back?
I'm Jocelyn Tenney from North Wales, and I just want to put an additional comment into the ones that have already been made. I believe this is a good beginning as a statement for the community that the school district encourages mutual respect, and I hope to continue on with it and not dilute it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, Ms. Sam?
Looks like somebody that's
Very briefly, my name's Ellen Allen. I'm from Hatfield. I'd like to use an analogy here, and I think you all remember I was at the last board meeting and I spoke on this very issue. An analogy that I would choose is probably not really a comfortable one or a pleasant one, but recently my son fell, scraped his arm very badly, and got a bad scab on it. And every time we turned around, he's out there crying again because he wouldn't put the rollerblades away. He just kept at it. And the next thing you know, it popped open again. There was crying again. And we were in constant trying to get this thing better, putting the Band-Aid on it, put the Band-Aid on it. Let's put some Neosporin on it. Let's really get rid of this thing. I hope tonight we're going to put some Neosporin on the wound that has occurred in this district. And it can not only begin up front, it can not only begin with the new board members, it begins with the audience. The audience participation is a very big part of what goes on here. There's a lot of interaction in the audience, and the way we conduct ourselves is very important. It's a message that we send back and forth. It's an interaction. We respond to the audience, we respond to what's going on up front. Again, I'm asking, as a community, let's get ourselves back together. Let's be proud to be able to say we live in North Penn. I think we can do it. I think we're the quality of citizen. I think we have the leadership here. We're capable of it. And we're going to prove that. We're going to prove that across the state, across the country, because I think we all know that we've been heard about across the country. So I'm asking again, and I'm probably going to keep asking. I probably won't go away till I see this stop. So let's put the Neosporin on, and let's not bring up any past stuff. We don't need it anymore. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chuck Hammond, again from Montgomery Township. Again, I think I will reiterate what the woman before me just said. I personally don't think we even need this. I think the foolishness that's gone on in this room for the last 6 months or so was totally uncalled for. I think some words that were said that were offensive to some people, again, are words in some instances. Many words to many people mean different things. The N-word, in some instances, is very offensive if I say it, yet amongst the black people, it's something of a term of endearment in some cases. We cannot and shall not legislate behavior amongst people. We must learn to tolerate each other's opinions. If we have a problem with someone or someone's comments, that person should be made aware of it at the time that they're said if they are offended by it. It should not be brought out to the extent that this particular incident, if it even happened, was brought out. And I think it's time we stop this and we proceeded as we did earlier in this meeting with discussing the incidents or the interest of the school students around here, and let's get back to curriculum, let's get back to teaching our children, and let's get some respect in this community. We don't need this. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, hearing or seeing none, I'd like to bring this to conclusion. Obviously, we won't conclude discussion on this tonight. We're going to have to bring it up again. I believe that Ken has enough to work with, along with our solicitor, Mr. Roos, and they will work together on it. I just want to say that I've struggled with this, and I feel the audience needs to know that there were times over the last 2 months that I felt the need to call for an executive session and said, why can't we just hash this out in executive session? We did it. At the last executive session, we talked briefly about how this would go, but I feel I can honestly say that this board made every attempt to talk about this openly as possible. This was difficult to bring forward. Personally, I'd like the statement to have just said what was said a few times tonight: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Take a vote on it and be done with it. That's how I personally feel. But we need to talk about it some more. We will do that. And again, instruct Ken to work with Mr. Roos, and I would ask board members to keep calling in to talk to Ken about this, and we will talk about it again.
Ken, will you be following through, as you did with the weapons policy, that this will go through another committee meeting rather than being brought forward November 16th?
Absolutely. This will go to another work session.
Thank you very much.
We haven't had a first.
Okay.
No.
Call for adjournment. I motion to adjourn.
Motion made to adjourn. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Executive session to follow on litigation.
How long we gonna be?
Mr. Roos, how long will we be?